This is a Hurricane Milton update for Wednesday, October the 9th. I'm Michael Groff, and Milton continues to be a very dangerous Category 5 hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico. It is making its turn toward the northeast, toward the coast of Florida. We'll get you the latest advisories. We'll check out modeling and assess the current situation and see what could happen with this storm system as it progresses toward the west central coast of Florida later this afternoon, tonight, and into the early morning hours on Thursday. All right, first, let's check out the satellite. And again, this continues just to be an amazing system. It has gone through several different cycles here. We have seen a dramatic upswing in intensity on Monday. This thing went from a tropical storm to a Category 1 or 2 in the early morning hours, and by the midday, early afternoon, it was up to a Category 5. It did weaken a little bit. We saw an eyewall replacement cycle during the day on Tuesday, and now here in the early morning hours, not perfectly symmetrical by any means, but a very powerful Category 5 hurricane. And top winds right now, 160 miles per hour. And this is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center and the forecast track. And the biggest change that we've seen in the last couple of advisories is to move the track once again back to the south. And we were talking about this for the last couple of days. We're going to see these shifts a little further north and a little further south, probably coming in a little further south per some of our better model guidance. But that doesn't take Tampa Bay out of the danger zone with this. It is slightly better news, but still, this is going to bring the worst conditions further south. Obviously, somebody will have to get the brunt of this, and that's going to be Sarasota down to Venice, down to maybe as far south as Fort Myers. And let's take a look here at some of the, well, first, let's check out, this is the official track from the Hurricane Center, a closer view. And again, they have this coming in between Sarasota and Venice, and this will be sometime around midnight, give or take a couple of hours, early in the morning hours on Thursday. The trend has been to slow this down ever so slightly. Now, that's bad news for a number of reasons. That's just more time to gather up all this water and push it toward the west central coast of Florida. And storm surge potential, even with a weakening system, will still be very, very dangerous. And so, yes, this will be undergoing some shear. Yes, this will be weakening. We'll use that term very, very loosely. It will be weakening, but it will still be probably a very dangerous Category 3 as it makes landfall. Again, somewhere right now, the thinking is between Sarasota and Venice. And obviously, the worst of this will be along and south of the center of circulation. But even up toward Tampa Bay, we're still expecting significant storm surge. Overall track takes it kind of across the central part of the Florida peninsula. Again, a little further south and east than the previous track. So instead of, right up Tampa Bay and right across from Brandon up to Plant City up to Orlando, this is now more toward just south of Sarasota, kind of tracking across northwest of Frostproof and exiting right there around Melbourne. And this will start to accelerate a little bit as it crosses over the Florida peninsula, but this is likely to remain a hurricane the entire time it's over the peninsula, weakening to about a Category 1. Storm surge still looks very bad for Tampa Bay, unfortunately. 10 to 15 foot storm surge anticipated, despite the slightly further south track. Again, that's because we're still going to see this over the water for a little bit longer. Now, yes, Tampa Bay is on the offshore side, but lowland inundation, storm surge is still going to be a dangerous thing here. And you want to prepare for the worst case scenario. And even though the track right now is a little further south, that could still change. We have to emphasize that. You're not out of the woods up in Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, Newport Richey. The west coast of Florida, everywhere is going to get hammered to a degree by this. Yes, it's better news for Cedar Key. It's better news for the Big Bend of Florida, which doesn't need any more bad news after Helene. But Milton will still bring significant storm surge, really, from the Swami River all the way down to Tampa, St. Pete, all the way down to Venice, Fort Myers. And again, these numbers, 5 to 8 foot storm surge around Fort Myers. Charlotte Harbor, looking at an 8 to 12 foot storm surge. And hopefully most people have heeded the evacuation orders. I've seen that most people have. That's good. And even some inland folks have decided to pack up and head on out. And that's, again, a good call. And yes, I know some people might get upset if they come back and your house is still there. I don't know. Well, why did we leave? Well, it's better to be safe than sorry. You've got one life. Why take the chance? And so if you have those evacuation orders, you should have already heeded them. And conditions are going to deteriorate very rapidly through the day on Wednesday, particularly from about noon onward. We're going to see that happening. All right, rainfall, that's another big factor with this as it slows down a bit. Now, we could see anywhere from widespread 6 to 10 inches, and some spots are going to see more than a foot of rain across the central part of the Florida Peninsula. Now, this outlook, this swath of the heaviest rain might have to be adjusted just ever so slightly further south, given the new track here. But regardless, we're going to see very heavy rain for much of the central part of the Florida Peninsula. Some spots, even in South Florida, could probably see a few inches of rain, and rainfall is going to add to the problem here because we already have saturated ground. This is from Milton. Okay, this doesn't count the rain that's already occurred, and we already have very saturated ground. And with the additional rainfall, and even with tropical storm force winds, that could uproot those trees. Now, with the very wet ground, it wouldn't take much to uproot trees. Obviously, hurricane force winds, that'll take down the trees, the power lines, and so you could be looking at a loss of utilities, power and internet and all that for an extended period of time. Days, maybe weeks. And there are some areas that still don't have power after Helene. Here's the latest flash flood potential. And again, high risk for the central part of the Florida Peninsula. This outlook, again, probably gets adjusted slightly further south with the moderate risk south and east of Tampa Bay. And again, down there toward Frostproof and some of those areas, Kissimmee, kind of in that moderate to high risk area, and further north up toward Orlando in that high risk. The moderate risk up to around Jacksonville. And so again, flash flood potential. We're going to see some very heavy rain. These outer bands can put down 2 and 3 inches of rain an hour. They're very efficient rain producers, sometimes more than that. And we'll see multiple rounds of rain. And there will be also the threat of isolated tornadoes. That's another thing. Now, again, that's going to be a little further south with the slightly further south track. But we might still see a couple around the Tampa Bay area and up toward Orlando. But really, the main tornado threat will probably be focused from Sarasota over to Melbourne and points south of there. And that's going to start during the day on Wednesday as this approaches in the evening hours, and then as the system along and south of that circulation center, the best risk for tornadoes. And again, tornadoes with these are not long track violent tornadoes like we see over the Plain States or the Deep South. These are very fast little whack-a-mole type tornadoes. They're very difficult to warn for. They spin up quickly. They're gone quickly. They're generally fairly weak. EF0, EF1 tornadoes, occasionally an EF2. But that's still enough to do damage to property and threaten your life. And that's why, even though the tornado threat is much less, it's still a concern. All right, let's take a look at modeling now. The tropical models, the ATCF set, where is this going? Again, very good agreement, a slight shift to the south in the tropical model set, but could we still see this track come up toward Tampa Bay? We could, but the general thinking is that this will be a little further south of there. Again, between Sarasota and Venice is the main thinking. The European ensemble, again, the mean is the black line, but again, that's just slightly further south than previous runs. GFS ensembles still remains kind of the outlier. It's a little bit further north. It's kind of been this way the entire time. It's had more of a northward bias, and it continues to have that. And again, this is not out of the realm of possibilities. You should have prepared for this scenario, and most people did. But still, you have to expect that this could make that slight turn further north or even further to the south. And that's why we have that cone of uncertainty. Even the Canadian model here, the Canadian model is, again, further south. This would be closer to Venice, at least on the ensemble mean. But, some of the members are a little further north, some a little further south. All right, let's take you through the deterministic modeling now. This is the GFS, the OZ run. And this right here, this is valid at 2 a.m. Eastern Time, Thursday morning, the very early hours on Thursday morning, 2 a.m. Eastern Time. And at that point, the GFS has Milton coming into Tampa Bay. So again, the GFS a little further north. And that would be the worst case scenario. Now, of course, the GFS has weakened the system quite a bit. The central pressure right now, 920 millibars. This has it coming in at 970 millibars. And so this would probably be an upper end category 2. And that's not something to take lightly. We don't want to diminish the threat here just because this is weakening, because as the system weakens, what happens? The wind fields expand out. Right now, it's still a very tight circulation, but those tropical storm force winds will encompass the entire Florida peninsula. Hurricane force winds over the entire central portion of the Florida peninsula ultimately. And so anybody can experience tropical storm force winds from the Keys all the way up to Jacksonville. Whether you're in Ocala, Jacksonville, all the way down to West Palm Beach, Miami, Key West. Everybody has the potential to experience tropical storm force winds. And again, hurricane force winds, St. Pete, Tampa Bay, Newport Richey, Zephyr Hills, Lakeland, all the way on down to Venice, and Fort Myers even could experience hurricane force winds. Yeah, Frostproof, Orlando, Melbourne, Cape Canaveral, Port Charlotte, all those areas. You can all experience hurricane force winds. The GFS just happens to be a little further north, and that would be, again, a slightly worst case scenario, or generally the worst case scenario for Tampa Bay. And then the GFS moves this along at a decent clip by about 2 p.m. Thursday afternoon. This is coming out there near Melbourne and most of the peninsula on the backside. And we'd start to see some rain tapering off over the west central part of the Florida peninsula. Let's look at the European. Again, the OZ European here. Now, this is at 5 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. The European's a little slower. It's unfortunately a little bit stronger, and it too has this system coming in right there around Tampa Bay, maybe almost right where the European is, or right where the GFS is, maybe just a few miles south, but pretty good agreement between those two models. So again, if that's right, it's the same situation. European moves it at relatively the same speed, just a little bit slower, and maintains a slightly higher intensity because it comes in at a stronger intensity. But either way, whatever, Category 2, Category 3, it's all very dangerous. Let's look at the European AI model. And again, this has been a great model. It's done very well through the hurricane season so far, and it is a little further south, and it has been further south the entire time for the most part. And it's a little bit faster. In fact, it's much faster. Now, this is 8 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Now, it has not made landfall as of 8 p.m. Wednesday, according to the European AI. That would occur probably closer to about 10 p.m. Eastern. This is a little bit of an outlier from the official Hurricane Center track and their timing. But if this is right, again, it's still bad news for Tampa Bay. It's still bad news for Clearwater and St. Pete and everybody else. But again, the European AI is a little bit weaker. It's actually quite a bit weaker than even the GFS. This would probably be a low-end Category 2, but that's still a potentially significant, devastating hurricane. But look at how fast the European AI moves this. I mean, because by 8 a.m. Eastern Time Thursday, it's already well off the east coast of Florida. I mean, this thing is moving along. It probably doesn't spend more than about 8 hours over the Florida peninsula, maybe less than that, if this is right. So it's got Milton just trucking along here. So that's kind of the modeling situation that we have right now. So let's do this. Let's check out what's going on right now. Let me show you this too. This is, again, we showed you this graphic yesterday. Milton is going to be weakening as it approaches the Florida peninsula. And why is it going to happen like that? Well, that's because the drier air sits just to the north of this. And drier air is going to start to intrude on this and start to weaken it. We've got a surface boundary that's sitting north of the region here across the deep south. And this drier air is kind of filtering into the western Gulf of Mexico, and it's starting to get entrained into the circulation, or it will start to get entrained into the circulation of Milton. And so you can see that on the precipitable water here. The precipitable water, this is a measure of atmospheric moisture. Another one, a more common representation, let's look at the surface dew points. This is tomorrow, again, afternoon at 5 o'clock. And you can see, yes, of course, tropical air over Florida, but look at that drier air back across Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. You got dew points down in the 50s. Further north, you got dew points down in the 40s. Some very dry air is coming on down behind this surface front. And so that will help to at least mitigate the strength of Milton somewhat. Weaken is kind of a misnomer of a term. Yes, it will not be Category 5 at the time of landfall. At least that's what most of the model guidance says. But it's still going to be a dangerous hurricane, one that you don't want to take lightly. And these are the winds aloft. These are the 250 millibar winds. This is way up above 30,000 feet in the atmosphere. And, again, we've got some shear going on here. And that's evident. And we've already seen there's a little bit of a asymmetrical shape to Milton right now. And so that shear, again, that's going to help to slightly mitigate the strength as this approaches the west coast of Florida. But this is very similar to Katrina. I mean, that's the analog we want to draw here. Remember, Katrina was a Category 5. It came in as a 3. And when it came in, obviously you saw what happened to New Orleans. That was more of an engineering failure than necessarily the sheer strength of Katrina. The real damage from Katrina directly from storm surge was felt along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And that was a Category 3, and this is kind of similar. The only difference is this system, Milton, has become a little stronger. At one point, it was top 5, top 6 strongest hurricanes in Atlantic history, and it's still a very powerful hurricane. So that's the upper level winds. Let's look at the radar right now across Florida. Check that out, the composite radar. We have some showers and thunderstorms right now, moderate showers and storms really from around Fort Myers up to Charlotte Harbor. Some heavier rain out there over the Gulf. We've got some light to moderate rain across St. Pete, Tampa, Plant City. Some light rain going on, and again, occasional moderate showers and some rumbles of thunder over toward Orlando and Melbourne. But generally, the rain isn't too bad. But any rain that we're getting right now, this is obviously anything. We don't want this now. We didn't want all that rain that we've had the last few days across the Florida peninsula. Because again, that's just saturating that ground, and that's going to make it easier for these tropical storm force and hurricane force winds to uproot trees and take down power lines and do some serious damage. And of course, we've got a lot of debris that's sitting out there on those barrier islands that's left over from Helene. And we have a lot of infrastructure damage still. So that's a concern. Here are current wind gusts as of 3:30 a.m. Eastern time. Again, not too bad. I mean, obviously right now with Milton still well off to the south and west, we got a 17-mile-per-hour wind gust. Again, these are gusts, not sustained winds, at St. Pete. Generally, wind gusts under 10 miles an hour further to the south. 20-mile-per-hour wind gust at Venice. Got a 13 there at Cape Coral. 17-mile-per-hour wind gust at Naples. And then further to the south, let's see, what is that? Well, that would be Sand Key. That's a 34-mile-per-hour wind gust, 29-mile-per-hour wind gust right now down there at Key West International Airport. Marathon Airport checking in with a 24-mile-per-hour wind gust. So again, obviously that's we got some gusty winds, mainly over the Florida Keys right now, as to be expected with this. That's a 23 mile per hour wind gust. Where is that at? Let's see if I can look here on my legend or bring that up. Let me see. That is Coral Shores High School. So again, a 16 mile per hour wind gust right now at Key Largo. So again, not dramatic, but obviously it's starting to get breezy to locally windy down in the Keys. And again, conditions will deteriorate down there. And even in the Florida Keys, we could see 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. So let's reset here. Let's take a look at the situation as it is right now. Top winds, max sustained winds, 160 miles per hour with Milton. Category 5. A gradual downtrend in intensity is anticipated through the day today. This probably makes landfall, according to the National Hurricane Center, as a Category 3 south of Tampa Bay. The timing is sometime around midnight Thursday morning, maybe a little after midnight, between Sarasota and Venice. But nobody should let their guard down. This track could change. We could still see a further north track. Again, if you're in that cone of uncertainty, and again, Tampa Bay is definitely in that cone of uncertainty, you have to still be ready for the full force of this to come on in. And the storm surge in Tampa Bay is still expected to be around 10 to 15 feet, despite this further southerly track. But that is still slightly better news for Tampa Bay. It's worse news for Sarasota, Venice, Fort Myers, Charlotte Harbor, those areas. So this is that's the latest right now. All right, thank you so much for checking us out. This has been a Hurricane Milton update. If you enjoy these videos, then be sure to subscribe, like, share, click that notification bell. Leave those comments, questions, and suggestions. If you really like what we do here, then click that thanks icon below the video here on YouTube or make a monetary contribution to us via PayPal, groffshow@gmail.com. Help support the channel, groffshow@gmail.com on PayPal. The executive producer of the Hurricane Milton update is my one and only, the sweetest of all time, the Asian sensation and proprietor of sweetchildaz.com.org and the Facebook page of the same name, Sweet Child Arizona, talking about my Michelle. Thanks for helping me out with all of these updates. And be sure to check out Michelle's relevant links down in the description and everything Michelle related. Our streaming station available 24/7, 365. Really appreciate if you check that out too. It's called KMGX. Again, all that linked up in the description. All right. That's it for the Hurricane Milton update. We'll have another one for you later today. We'll also have our Phoenix, Arizona weather discussion later today as well, as we normally do on this channel, Monday through Friday. And we'll talk about the excessive heat and all that going on here, more record-breaking heat here in the Southwest. Thank you so much for watching. Please be safe out there, and we'll see you back here later today